Okay, this is the sit rep for August 17th, 2025. Jon Elmer's here. Hey John.
Hello, Justin.
John, we caught your resistance report on Thursday, followed the Electronic Intifada live stream as we always do.
How did you find it?
Um, I mean, it's just beyond belief. Like like the persistence of the resistance in Gaza, the ability to continue delivering on these operations. It's like it's really mathematical where you can say where the Israelis go, they will be ambushed. Where the Israelis go, they'll take casualties and their vehicles will be destroyed. It's not, there's a chance. It's 100% reliable for 2 years now. It's incredible to see this.
And it's amazing that I mean, it's not amazing. It's typical that the Western analysis, even from the like expert class, is
Yeah.
still unable to understand this and still
Mhm.
frame it like, people on the BBC, they're like smart, smartest people in the room people are like, all the resistance is able to do is, mount hit and run attacks as guerrilla force. You're just like, I don't know, man.
Well, what did you?
You have like 681 days of data at this point.
Yeah.
I could understand those kind of like buttoned up suits, not really like maybe they weren't plugged into the channels that were
Right.
putting these videos out. I watched that at CBC, like with Evan Dyer, their
Oh yeah.
reporter, who was like, 6 months after the war, 6 months into the war, he wrote this post where he was like, I think he saw a video and he was like, I think that the Israelis might be shooting randomly out a window in this video. You're just like,
Yeah,
okay,
but
that's you've seen that
he's
for six
lying.
months.
I'm sorry, he's lying because we know that CBC were in that plane where they took the same video of the destroyed aerial photos of Gaza just
Yes.
a week and a half ago, and one publication, I think in Britain, published it, and CBC was told not to, and they did. So
You know what? Everyone else did.
yeah.
The BBC and CBC didn't, but everyone else that was told not to, they did. And they did it. They might not have done it in the moment, but they all did. Like even Sky News, like,
It's
not.
interesting that you and me would be the kind of people who would be advocates of public broadcasting.
Oh, yeah.
And yet it's the public broadcasters that are censored and
Yeah.
the private broadcasters that actually aired the footage. It's remarkable.
Yeah. It's a dark time in media for sure, because this war in Gaza is the final nail in the coffin of
Yeah.
the CBC.
Yeah. Who
And
needs it?
yeah,
I don't I find myself unable to make an argument in favor of humanity at this point. Never mind United Nations or CBC or whatever. Like
yeah.
if I was brought before the creator and told like, okay, make the best possible case that you can for humanity here.
The
Be a
loss
tough
of public broadcasting is going to be long term devastating. But the reality of it today is
it's
like
lost.
good riddance.
Yeah. 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 They self ruined themselves.
Yeah.
So
And now everyone's admitting it's a genocide, right? So
yeah.
now everybody who's not the CBC and BBC, they all get to come out for when history reflects back on it, they
Mhm.
can say, like, oh, it took me time or whatever. But the CBC and BBC can't do that. So they're
Yeah.
going down in history as holding on to this line.
They're
And
gonna have to
all
say we weren't
through,
following orders.
but they couldn't have followed orders better, right? Like
Yeah.
to talk over guests who
Yeah.
said genocide and say, "Oh, but we know the Israelis would take
Disagree.
dispute that term," which is literally what the BBC and CBC did at every single solitary instance of somebody mentioning that for the whole time. And I listened to them both. Shame on me.
No, I mean, I
But I
admire
mean, the
your
CBC has
stomach.
basically been, it's there's no point anymore, but at least with the BBC, it's around the clock. World service is at least round the clock. So you're getting at least world news, but to it's been hard to listen to them for
You know,
sure. And the interrupting people who said genocide, it just looks so weird because it's like what the Israeli guest would say, right? The Israeli guest would talk and say, "Oh, we don't think it's that," but it's
yeah,
the host.
they don't have to even, they don't even need to bring the Israelis on. So, John, I just want to brag to our listeners for a second about this article that I wrote in
Oh yeah, I
2009. And it
yeah.
was called "Turn Off the Canadian Media, Please."
Take your victory lap.
That was 16 years ago, and it was about Gaza, by the way. It was about Gaza. It was about the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So,
Yeah,
um,
I remember that. Because there was also, just for listeners to know, there was also an era of Justin where you would meticulously take down the like
CBC in particular.
everything a particular journalist had written
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
shock their sensibilities, which
yeah.
basically every single time they reacted the same way. Like, you can't say that about
Me?
me.
I'm one of the
I'm the
good
good one.
ones.
Yeah, they always said the exact same thing. And then Justin would say, as a matter of fact, I read 286 bylines since 1989.
Actually, you're worse than I wrote about you first.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
takedowns were one era,
Mm.
and then just forget it, turn it off
Fair enough.
was another era. And that was 16 years ago. Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
So now we're not the Canadian media, so we can, so don't turn us off, you
Yeah, we
guys.
just happen to
Uh,
be born here.
diplomacy front is not very successful. I just wanted a couple of statements from Hamas officials struck me as powerful. I don't know, worth quoting. They put these statements out for a reason. I thought I should quote them. One is from Hassam Badran on August 9th. He said, "We are not betting on unseen or intangible things. Our positions are based on a clear assessment of our people's interests formulated after consultation with the other faction." So the message here is like, we're not changing our demands to end the war, leave Gaza, open the crossings, end the siege. We're not gonna change those. So, and it's not because we're inflexible. It's because those are what we need to end the
Because
war.
they're the basic bare minimum humanitarian requirement for the
Yeah,
Palestinian people.
yeah. And then Osama Hamdan, kind of speaking, I think, to the various factions in Palestine and outside that are trying to just say things like Abbas said a long time ago, or others. Abbas being the president of the Palestinian Authority on what year 20 of his 4-year term, um, and he said, just disarm already or whatever. And Osama Hamdan on August 10th, he said, "If some think that the resistance has the option of surrender, they are deluded. And if the enemy thinks it can force Palestinians to surrender, if its aggression continues, it is deluded." So I think that's a really important message for internal and external audiences that he says there.
Yeah. To surrender at this point, yeah, it's just not an option.
Israel doesn't accept surrenders, as we've been saying on the sit rep anyway. How hard has the Syrian new Jolani government been trying to surrender, and Israel just keeps bombing them and taking their land and taking their stuff. The Lebanese government has been trying to surrender on Hezbollah's behalf, and the Israelis bomb them. So it's just like surrender. I thought Osama Hamdan said that perfectly. He said we don't even
Yeah.
need to talk about it because we don't
Hmm.
even have the option.
Hmm. Yeah, that
So
is a good one.
um
But they've also been saying the same thing all along, right?
yeah,
And that is the
absolutely.
thing that is different about Hamas. and Qassam than previous iterations of the Palestinian struggle.
Yeah.
And they were formed to not repeat the mistakes of the past, and
Yeah.
they're holding to that, and to not do it in the darkest moments,
Hmm.
during the starvation campaign, to hold on at that time
Yeah.
when that wouldn't have solved the situation anyway, but
Yep.
that's to if starvation could lead to surrender,
Hmm.
that is a disaster for the Palestinian
That's true.
experience.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. You're set what that's the ultimate precedent that you're setting. You're basically giving the Israelis every reason to starve you.
Yeah. Instead,
Um,
what happened is they largely were, they're shown to the world starving,
yeah.
and has in a lot of ways, as it should, changed the tenor of many international actors in this because of how horrific it was.
Shall we mention Norway then? Norway, I don't know how much people know about Norway, but Norway is the European oil superpower, offshore oil, and they have the biggest sovereign wealth fund, I think, in Europe. And they put a little bit of the D in BDS this week. They announced that their sovereign wealth fund is divesting from various Israeli companies, and they've made it clear that it's because of what Israel's doing. So, BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and that's also been a campaign for 20 since 2005, I think, maybe a little bit around there. And the B, anybody can do, anybody can boycott, even though you will face legal consequences for it in America now. Sanctions is, of course, the hardest. The only sanctions I think right now on Israel are effectively from Yemen. Um, but D, divestment, that's the middle one, and that's also tough. Unions push for it, and lots of different organizations have pushed for it. But this is a significant step, and it was noticed, John, by Syed Abdelmalik al-Houthi, Badruddin al-Houthi, who in his speech on August 14th, he made a couple of points. Gaza City, he said the announcement of attacking Gaza City is an escalatory step. Cooperation, he kind of praised the Palestinian armed factions for cooperation. He said this is among the
Mm.
most important elements of strength. He, what's the word? Criticized the Lebanon government. He said the Lebanon's decision turns the Lebanese government into a police force for Israel. And he said, "Come on, the problem is not the weapon of the resistance. The weapon of the resistance defends you, your freedom, your honor, your independence. The problem for our nation is the weapon in the hands of the Israeli enemy that kills children and civilians, destroys your homes, occupies your lands, and plunders your wealth." And then he mentioned Norway in a way to shame other Arab countries. He basically said, while Saudi Arabia is shipping weapons and Egypt is signing gas deals, Norway is boycotting. So, what's up
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah, I noticed that joint operations room shout out by Al Houthi, and that's yeah, it's I think it's been a really interesting and important part of this battle. I mean, the other factions are fairly limited in their operations, and the Qassam brigades were established. They're not established, but built themselves into effectively a national army.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that absorbing the other factions into that national army is a very important part of the liberation struggle. And there's times where there's some of those factions that you weren't so sure that would be something that you would cooperate on, but they don't cooperate in any other ways. Although the Al Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the Al Amudi Brigade is even them kind of distance themselves from
right.
the Al Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. But yeah, I mean, there was a history in Gaza of real repression against the leadership and cadre of the Qassam Brigades. So that model of the national national army, I guess, not to skip ahead, but is also at the heart of what's happening in Lebanon right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in addition to the speech from Abdelmalik al-Houthi and the usual Friday march, um, there were 6 drones that Yemen sent from their UAV force on August 12th, and I believe today there was a missile, a Palestine 2 ballistic missile targeting Tel Aviv
Yep.
airport.
Yep.
So Yemen is still in the fight. Now, I guess we can talk about
And they
Lebanon.
got bombed today by the
Oh,
Israelis.
I saw that.
And the Israelis, again, they bombed a power plant, a civilian target,
There
to
you go.
impact the whole population,
In Sanaa,
as they
right?
do. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's tougher for the Israelis because Trump. Um, I mean, I guess that the American participation in these bombing raids has to be relatively low key. I doubt the Israelis can do this by themselves, but
Well, they did it with this one. They did it with a warship. So
okay.
that's, yeah, I mean, they seem to be able to do them on their own, but they're fairly limited. And at some point, they're vulnerable.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's not clear. This was, I wrote it down. Yeah, 14th time that they've attacked. 14th separate time they've attacked. Obviously, more than 14 strikes, but
That's just the Israelis.
that's just the Israelis
Okay.
alone.
Yeah, because the Americans would be in the 50s, I would think,
Yeah.
over the past 2 years. Okay, so Lebanon.
Yeah. So Lebanon.
Obviously, the Lebanese government, I believe, August 5th announced. We've both. I mean, it's been covered in EI. It's been covered on the SITREP. But they announced that they were going to. They told the Lebanese army to draw up a plan to disarm Hezbollah. And people and pressed, some of these politicians were pressed on the issue, and they said, no, Hezbollah has to disarm. And they said, journalists asked them, well, how do you plan to defend defend Lebanese sovereignty from Israel? And they said, well, disarmament first, and then we'll talk about that. So totally empty headed puppet kind of behavior. The president of Lebanon, I think today or yesterday, said something really rather ridiculous. He said the Americans basically said if he said we were not threatened over the possibility of rejecting the American proposal for disarming Hezbollah. The Americans simply said if you proceed with the proposal, that's welcome. If not, Lebanon will no longer be among our priorities. Really? So that's why the US built the largest embassy in the world on a gigantic multi-football field compound because Lebanon is not among their priorities. That's why satellite US satellites and the place is crawling with US spooks and spies because Lebanon's not among their priorities.
And even as if that's a bad thing if it wasn't among their
Yeah, as if that
priorities.
would
Like,
not be the greatest gift you could give
yeah.
Lebanon is not being among their priorities.
So what I was saying about integrating into the armed forces, and I said previously that about Lebanon, is that this is the thing: is that the Lebanese government is not offering to integrate Hezbollah into the Lebanese
Right.
army. They're not. They're talking about taking their weapons away. They're not talking about absorbing them into a national army that can defend itself.
Which happens a lot in the world. There are
And
lots
I
of
think it would be
rebel,
something that Hezbollah would be,
yeah, open to.
yeah, that would be a difficult thing to say no to if it
Yeah,
was done in the
yeah,
proper way. It's the higher level realization of your national liberation struggle.
yeah,
And that's the
exactly.
point that um yeah, then I was linking it to the way that Qassam operates is that to not let these kind of differences, political differences, get in the way of what ultimately is the goal, which is to
Absolutely.
have a national army that defends your territory.
Yeah, yeah, that's where they're supposed to go. Meanwhile, Syria is headed in the opposite direction,
And Syria is the
possibly headed for
example
partition. Yeah,
to look at this, and it just should make it the most obvious time to any person on in any part of Lebanon, because it's not like if Israel attacks Lebanon, they protect the Christians, or that the bombs don't fall on,
Yeah. I mean, they were trying to
they
do that,
do.
weren't
They
they? They were
try.
trying to do that at the towards the end of the September 2024.
They try, but if you're going to
Yeah.
destroy us, I mean, and that's one of the things that Israel didn't do was destroy the Lebanese state this time. But that's what happens in
Mhm.
an open conflict. So it hurts everyone in the country when
Yeah.
so the idea that you would want to give up that capacity. And in fact, you would almost think that these collaborationists would it would be more likely that they should want to bring them into a national army. But
They
they
can't
don't,
control
because
it.
their only goal is to
Whatever.
negotiate surrender.
Yeah, whatever they're told. Their only goal is whatever they're told. I mean, there are some among them probably that are savvy and think they can get a better deal by playing the two sides. But
Yeah.
for the most part, it seems fairly disciplined self-destruction and surrender. I want to read Naim
Yeah.
Qassem's speech though at length because there are lots of it's I would say it's the toughest speech. He's like the
No
hardest,
question.
yeah, the toughest talk, let's
No
put it that
question.
way, than he's ever had. So a bunch of quotes. Let's go. I'll just go through some. Everyone must know that Palestine will remain the compass. Whatever Israel does today, from starving, killing, and destroying the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people, whatever America does in sponsoring this dangerous deviation, this vile, aggressive, sinful assault, will not deter the Palestinian people from continuing, from strength, from maintaining the resistance. Uh, there's a fair amount of Shia religious reference that I have not studied properly still. I've asked, I know a little bit about this battle and the slogan that far from us is humiliation, but I really don't know as much as I should about this, and I'm sure people will berate me in the comments and also probably patiently tell me about it in the comments. Hope I'm hoping for more of the latter than the former. My my brothers and sisters. So I'll continue. Do not be afraid. Do not fear them. They are cowards, incapable. They know they will lose everything if they destroy Lebanon. Stop living in this intimidation, claiming that you are preserving Lebanon. You are not preserving Lebanon. You are preserving your own lives and positions, even if it means eliminating your partners in the country. Is this partnership? Is this patriotism? And then I think this is one of the lines that Nasrallah would say too. He said, if you feel incapable, and you are, then leave the enemy to face us. Do not confront on our behalf. Just be silent, sit aside, and leave us be. Ouch. He said, Netanyahu declared he wants greater Israel, meaning all of Palestine, parts of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. He says it now in the intoxication of victory and the overwhelming American support for this tyrant. Some Arab states wish not even to condemn, but to simply remain silent, at least not to secretly support Israel by attacking the resistance and aiding in striking it. In any case, this government has taken a very dangerous decision, violating the Charter of National Coexistence, exposing the country to a major crisis. The legitimacy of the resistance comes from blood, liberation, right, and land, not from you, and it does not need you. We have postponed protests, but if it is imposed upon us, we are ready for it and we have no choice but to face it. The resistance will not hand over its weapons while aggression continues and occupation remains, and we will wage a Karbala like battle if necessary, and we are confident we will win this battle and proclaim never to humiliation. So, this Karbala battle is the battle where their most important leader, Hussein, I think, um, basically stood up against the Umayyads despite being massively outnumbered um, and said, far from us is humiliation. So it was like a fight against overwhelming odds and martyrdom and courage. So these are all the values of um, that they go to when they're faced with an enemy like Israel or the US, whatever. So he says, and then he says, either it remains or we remain together, or farewell to everything, and you will bear the responsibility. So that's also a very clear.
He has not spoken like this
That's what I
before.
that's what I felt. Yeah. That's what I felt. And like there was something about like the sharpness of the backdrop, the like it was a different feeling.
Yeah.
It was a
I
different
mean, he had the toughest act to follow, and just, you know,
feeling.
I think that there's certain elements of this. I mean, this is obviously an literally existential moment for them.
Yeah.
But it's also something that, he's getting into the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now over to occupied Palestine. Um, I mentioned to you I wanted to conclude by going over some of George Abdallah's quotes from the interview he did with Palestine Chronicle. I thought it was an amazing interview, but let's do a bit about Gaza, West Bank. In terms of West Bank, I mean, Jenin and Tulkarm both announced the 200th day of Israeli raids and siege of those two cities in the West Bank.
Yeah, just devastating. And they've carved up both of Jenin and the Tulkarm refugee camp have been carved up in the way that was Israel's desire all the way back to the Second Intifada, when they want there wasn't there you know I spent a lot of time in Jenin, and in the camp. I mean, this is the whole thing about the Palestinian struggle: is the refugee camps are packed.
Mhm.
um, they're just a series of alleys, and it's very difficult for a fighting force to move through it. And that is the story of the Israelis in Jenin, is getting constantly hit by these ambushes and significant operations that don't allow the Israelis to just hide in their tanks.
Yeah.
And so they've always wanted to carve up, to have roads,
Mhm.
essentially tank wide roads that would go through the camp. And the camp has always defended and rebuilt to prevent these widened roads. And that was a big thing about the rebuilding after the 2002 destruction in the camp,
Mhm.
which came about because of an operation in an alleyway that killed a number of Israeli soldiers and led to to them doing what now is just their normal disposition, which is just wipe out the entire camp because of a single military defeat. But it's just very, yeah. So that's been, my whole life watching this, and to see this week and last week, really, were the 2 weeks we saw overhead, photography of the two
Mhm.
camps. And it's just the Tulkarm one, especially because it's completed. It's just, they just redrew roads. And if you look at it from above, it goes from that densely populated, refugee
Yeah.
camp with alleyways everywhere to just like straight up roads across. Yeah, and just people dispossessed now, 200 days with not really an end in sight on that. And it's difficult to know. I mean, it's difficult to know Israel's military plans. Like, their defense minister, Israel Katz, is not a military person. He's just a puppet for Netanyahu. So when he says things, it's not even like, he's not even connected at all to the military. He doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. So he just says the thing that is the most genocidal political position. It's not clear that he has any connection to the practicality of administering that, but he's
Mhm.
talking about, remaining in the camps indefinitely, like patrolling inside. It's just a new world that they've created in the West
Yeah.
Bank while everybody's watching Gaza.
And yeah, I mean, they've created a new world globally. I think we've talked many times on this channel about how it's not just us, it's them who, the Israelis themselves, have been shocked by what they've been able to get away with.
Yeah,
And that's the biggest surprise to everyone in this world, is that the world doesn't actually work according to any of the constraints that everybody believed, including the Israelis themselves, were constraining them.
yeah. Yeah, because they yeah, I mean because they used to be in it used to be like a tripartite negotiation about how the roads would be in Jenin, right? Like the United Nations would be involved and NGO, you know.
Mhm.
Anyways, it's just now it's just considered a like a battlefield, and whether people go back or not or whatever is not Israel doesn't care about that.
Yeah, yeah, they've no reason to care about it.
So
They al-Houthi said this. He said, they chant death to the Arabs at their chants. It's one of their main chants, and he's like, they're that's what they're implementing.
yeah,
Um, you know, that's that. You want to know what their plan is? That's their plan.
yeah,
Their
and the
plan is
yeah,
begins and ends with death to the Arabs.
yeah,
Uh, okay, so in terms of the only other thing is like, 2000 September 2000, Ariel Sharon went to Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that started the so-called Second Intifada. Ben Gavir is doing that every other day now.
yeah. Did you see the footage where he went and saw Marwan Barghouti in solitary confinement too?
Yeah,
And you can't
yeah,
even recognize. I couldn't even recognize. I wasn't even sure what I was watching. If it was mistranslated, if someone
yeah.
didn't know what they were talking about, if they said the wrong person. He's not even.
He doesn't look anything like
He
really
doesn't look
anybody.
anything like. It's really incredible. And then just a couple, I guess, a day or two after that, like his wife came out and said, like, I didn't recognize him. So, but yeah, just yeah, I mean, the highest order of fascism. And also just like who wants to fight in that army? Like if you're a captive in Gaza and you see footage of Ben Gavir going and telling Marwan Barghouti that he's going to slit his throat in solitary confinement, how do you feel about that? Like that really requires a significant level of dignity in the Palestinian resistance to not just,
Mhm.
you know, react to that in the way that it should be reacted to when you're both holding prisoners, and just the way that the Israelis have just the way that they've tortured
Mhm.
Palestinian prisoners so structurally and openly, and you know yeah, it's just like the whole reason for the why you're supposed to treat prisoners
Yeah,
well is because the other side has your prisoners. Like it's
yeah.
just a basic understanding of how the world works, and the Israelis just don't have that.
They don't care.
They don't care. And so you're fighting in this army that they don't care about it. And when you're in captivity, your side is going to show the cruelest, most depraved treatment of the people who are
Hmm.
in direct,
Yeah,
uh,
who are
who
supposed to be traded for you.
who are your direct analogy or whatever the word is. Like,
Yeah,
but it does like it doesn't seem like that's what the
how they
Palestinians
think.
do. And I think
No,
that
they don't. And
yeah.
and let's also remember the whole time the Israelis are hunting and trying to murder you if you're an Israeli captive in Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Uh,
not clear how this army is going to go forward. I mean, I know that this war is not going to end right with the collapse of Israel. Like that is
yeah,
a process that is in the future at least at some point, but they're everything that they're doing is making it an army you don't want to be a part of, and they require it deeply.
if you think like a normal human being, but that doesn't seem to be like we can't count on that with Israel.
No.
Society doesn't not seem to have any reference point that's normal. But I did want to ask you, so they're moving into Gaza City. The stated goal, explicit goal, is to ethnically cleanse Gaza City again. Uh, 4 new divisions of the
That's what they're
Israeli army.
talking about. 4 full divisions. So, like
So
somewhere
that's what I
around
wanted to ask
10
you, because
times more troops than they have right now.
so yeah, what are they? I mean, because what you were talking about on the live stream on Thursday is um to say the least, at odds with what they're announcing. So they're what do they have? What's the Israeli order of battle in Gaza and Lebanon and Syria and the West Bank right now?
Well, so Gideon's chariots, they made a big thing about how it was four divisions, but those four divisions only had, some of them only had a single brigade fighting in them rather than four, sometimes five, that would be a normal division.
Full
Um,
strength.
so they're fighting under the banner of a division, and they're saying we have four divisions. They made this big stink about how, they were going in with four divisions, but it's not like it's not a secret that they're not full complement divisions. And Gideon's chariots failed, and they all admit that it failed. And essentially, they admit that it failed because they just didn't, like, the troops essentially didn't. They didn't have enough troops to fight, and the troops that were fighting, they didn't want to die in this, situation that seems like there's no end in sight to. And they basically stopped fighting, and that was the thing that I was reporting on, like back in July. I was saying, like, they're talking about this operation, they're saying, it's going well and all this, but satellite imagery shows that they haven't moved. They haven't moved forward in, it was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So, like, basically all of the month of July, they basically didn't advance in this Operation Gideon's Chariots. They essentially just destroyed houses and buildings, and they used military force to roughly protect the excavator drivers knocking over
Mhm.
buildings.
And
But
they
they
made
didn't.
like suicide trucks out of their
Yeah, well, they're
armored.
going big on these M113 robot suicide bomber. Like, they're turning all of the American stockpile of these M113s that are basically, they're not battle useful anymore. They have a few thousand of them that the Americans gave them, and it seems that the tempo of them using those is going to break it down on the show, because they're doing it a lot. It's so much that the like Netanyahu even said they're doing it. It's popping up in army radio field reports, but the Palestinians have been describing it
Mhm.
for weeks and months, that they're using them all over. They're using them at Beit Hanun, they're using them in Jabalia, they're using them Shujaiya. They're using them heavily in Zaytun, where the operation is. They're using them in Khan Yunis, and there's only a limited number of these.
Mhm.
The vehicles themselves, only a limited number, but presumably this
It's
kit,
so funny.
the kit to make
Ima-
it a robot, they must have gotten
you were
an
talking
influx
about
of them.
you were talking about imagining what it's like to be an Israeli prisoner of war in Gaza, watching the housing minister or whatever the hell that guy is go and torment the high profile
Yeah,
Palestinians
he
or whatever
threatened to
this
kill
is.
him.
Imagine the Americans who are providing these armored vehicles and the Israelis are using them as bombs. The only like they just use everything to an Israeli is a bomb. Like
Yeah,
just, we just
yeah. The
we
20 some billion dollars, it hasn't been
yeah,
enough.
point it at a civilian target and blow it up.
Yeah,
Well, you do that with cars, you do that with drones, you do that with planes, you do that with bombs.
yeah.
It's incredible.
It's
So
yeah.
they're recruiting, and I've seen, I'm usually a glass half empty kind of person, but it actually looks like their recruitment of the religious Orthodox is going relatively well. I mean, they're less than half of them are showing up, but more than a quarter are showing up. So something like 29,000 have shown up apparently out of 80,000 that they've called.
Is that right? I
That's
didn't
what
see that
I saw
number.
that somewhere.
I didn't see
Um,
that number.
so they're saying it's a recruitment crisis, but like they got 29,000 more.
Well, I
And
think that they're still being blocked from putting through the legislation that would make it, um, that would
compulsory.
force them, right? Like that's what Netanyahu's government is. Netanyahu's government wants the war to continue indefinitely, but it
Yeah.
also wants to block the the
Troops
ultra
that could.
orthodox troops being called up.
And
So
the ultra
Israel,
Orthodox troops are not pacifists. They just don't want to go and fight because they believe they're in Israel to read,
yeah,
not fight, right?
yeah, it's owing to like basically a deal that happened in 1948
Right.
when there was something like 400. There was 400 fighting age people from these
Communities.
from the ultra orthodox community that were trying to set up the yeshiva like system. And so there's only 400 of them at the time, and basically they were able to like negotiate this deal with Ben Gurion through pragmatism or whatever. But yeah, now the number's 80,000, and the number is 15,000 every year. Ultra Orthodox graduate into being 18 every single year.
Right.
Um, and there's the Israelis are openly saying that they're missing like at least 20,000 soldiers. So it's like 1 year of ultra Orthodox could replace this problem that the military has. But yeah, these guys at this point, they're like completely funded. They're just like you know the Toronto equivalent of trust fund kids who just have
Yeah.
everything. They don't need to throw down for anything because they've already got everything set up the way that they want it. They're funded to live for their whole lives. Um, and who wants to fight in the war? And that's the thing that they basically say, like, we don't want to fight. We don't want to fight in the
Yeah.
war. But a lot of Israelis also say, like, we don't want them to fight in the war either. Like, at some point, you don't want to just flood your military with a bunch of people who don't want to fight and suck at it.
Right.
It's just the
Although,
dynamics in Israel are just really,
tell me if I remember this wrong because I think you have reported on one unit that is consists of the ultra orthodox, and they're among the more vicious. I mean, they're all vicious and vile, but these are among the most vicious of the units, are they not?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, and they're trying to essentially set up units, and they do these like they had one just a couple weeks ago where they graduated a class of
Hmm.
whatever of ultra orthodox, and they gave them a different color beret than so they had like their own color beret. Like they're really trying to like, come on, you can do
Sweeten it.
it,
Yeah.
you can do it. It's just really pathetic, and yeah, they're a particularly nasty part of the society. They're like
Yeah.
very genocidal,
Yeah.
um, and they don't care about the state in that sense. And like,
Well, yeah, and I mean they're the most religious, they're the most invested in the religious stories and the most genocidal passages of the Bible and also the bringing about of the end of the world, which is
yeah.
part
And they
of
also have
their
10
religion.
kids. So they're like
Yeah.
they for our lifetime covering this conflict, they've been basically buying time.
Hmm.
Because when I started, when we were
Yeah.
in our early 20s covering this,
Yeah.
they were trying to buy time because they were like, our families have 8 kids,
Yeah.
and the Ashkenazi families have 2.2 kids or whatever, the same thing as Toronto. So they're just like, stick with it. In a generation and a half, this isn't going to be something that anyone can tell us to do. And Israel needs them because of the 2.2 kids isn't
Hmm.
enough to grow their country.
Right.
They don't have another Soviet miracle where, Jews are coming from somewhere else in the world to save their demographics. And so essentially the ultra Orthodox are the the thing that can keep up with Palestinian growth in the area that is like roughly what, you know, saves them
I
from apartheid,
I guess
essentially.
they're putting their faith in Zohran Mamdani, causing all the New York Jews to leave, but the New York Jews are voting for Mamdani, so that may not be.
Yeah, it just these contradictions within the Israeli state are just they're so deep. they're not just like newspaper stories. They're
It's
like the
true, John. It's true, but I find they keep being able to muddle through. They keep being able to figure it out at the last minute. It's like that thriller novel, where the hero just always just comes out by the skin of their teeth somehow.
well, they vote. They
Yeah,
vote.
yeah.
They vote. So it's like they are if they are the 10 kids to a family, each
Hmm.
family gets 10 more kids, and then they're the people casting ballots. At some point they are going to run. I think in that time is essentially it's Netanyahu's government.
But I think they're gonna sign up in adequate numbers to join the army. I think that's what's gonna happen. I just don't think they're gonna fight any better than the rest. So
No.
the army is the weak link of the Israelis. The Air Force is not.
Well, so this is the thing. So Gaza City, they're saying basically Netanyahu needs a way to continue the war.
Yeah.
The IDF didn't have any intentions of going back into Gaza City, into Western
Yeah.
Gaza City. That was not on their radar at all. This Gideon's Chariots was a way that they could say like, "Hey, there's four divisions,"
Yeah.
even though the divisions were at one quarter of their strength. They called back reservists for Gideon's Chariots at back in March or whatever it was, I guess April, and like somewhere between, again, these are secret numbers, but like army correspondents are talking about somewhere between a third and a half showed up to fight that battle, and now they're saying they're going to ethnically cleanse Gaza City, and that operation requires more troops than have been in Gaza in since
Since '03. I mean 2023. Since 2023.
yeah, since at least since it converted, like the invasion of Rafah in May of 2024. Um, and to hold Gaza City, or whenever they're just doing the same like operational control, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of fighters in Gaza City.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fighters in Gaza City. Um, yeah, and if they're framing it as like, did you see the videos that came out today? The videos from Khan Yunis today by the Resistance were,
Yeah.
the videos were incredible, but also it was just like everything's gone. Like
Yeah.
how difficult it is to fight in Khan Yunis when you don't have a building. Like
Yeah.
there's no the distance between what buildings are left is just, yeah, it makes it a difficult battle space. But Gaza City, there's a lot of fighters, and the Israelis need to call up. They're talking about four full divisions, and it's not clear where they're going to get them from. They're going to have to call up the reserves, and then the reserves are going to have to show up, which
Yeah.
previously, if presumably they're going to show up less than they showed up the last time they were called up. Presumably,
Yeah.
each time they get called up, less will come.
Yeah.
So this operation, yeah, I mean, technically, they're a civilian military. Like they're run by the
Right.
civilians. The politicians are supposed to dictate to the army what they can do, but I think just historically, it's always worked the other way. And the army is just very clear, has been clear for months. Like we can't keep fighting. We can't keep fight like
Mhm.
the soldiers themselves, their parents, like just kind of all of the noise is just like we can't keep this up. And then that's their regular force. But when you're pulling the 40-year-olds out of their jobs, that's when it becomes like really a
Yeah.
difficult push for the state itself to. So yeah, they're drawing them into this battle in Gaza City, which will presumably take, I mean, unless they
They're
just
saying till the
quit.
end of October. Yeah.
Well, it's supposed to start in October,
Oh, it's
and
supposed
then
to
it's going
start.
to take, I mean, how many months will it take? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to predict, but it's like this is like 6-month battle, and where everybody's going to go, whether the captives survive. It's just like the army becomes to agree to this, and the chief of staff to agree to this. It's just the army doesn't have any dignity anymore in this Netanyahu
When
fascist
did they?
government.
When did? Yeah, I think
Because
that
he
was
was
lost.
because
It's
he
been
was
lost for
speaking,
a while, I would say.
but he was yeah, well, and they've staffed him. Zamir, the chief of staff, is Netanyahu's guy. But Zamir was like, there was a thing in the, like, openly they were saying, he was saying we can't do this, and if we do it, like, the army's going to collapse. There's this whole
Yeah,
cohort of ex IDF chiefs,
the
Amman
exec Rick.
military intelligence, like, all of these guys speaking out saying that the army's gonna collapse, that they're losing, like, that they're going to lose the war if they go into Gaza City. And yeah,
Yeah,
and Netanyahu just, and the government just doesn't, they don't really care. And there's no elections. There's just no elections on the horizon in Israel, and it's not even clear that elections would solve this problem. Like,
yeah. I mean,
Netanyahu
uh,
continually forms governments after their
yeah.
elections.
I just think that you know, there's a lot of things that we thought mattered that don't, and that like the Israeli captives don't matter to Israel.
Yeah.
Obviously, international law doesn't matter to Israel. Obviously, criminal
The effectiveness of
prosecutions,
their fighting force
the
doesn't
effectiveness
matter.
of their fighting force doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And so I don't think that elections are going to matter either. Why would elections matter? Like they're going what's important is to continue what's important to Israel is to continue the genocide. And if elections are going to stand in the way of that, I don't think they're going to let elections stand in the way of that. So, you're not going to let a small thing like an election get in the way of bringing about Armageddon and
No, but
starving
the
children.
election is when there's a potential for Netanyahu to not be the government and therefore go to jail
He's
for a
and therefore
decade.
therefore
So
there's that pressure.
he's trying to string things out so that they don't go to elections. And there's been at least half a dozen key moments where he's essentially prevailed in
Yeah,
internal
yeah,
battles that have allowed the
yeah,
government to not collapse, which in Israel, governments collapse all the time. And also, they always have national unity governments during war, and they don't
yeah.
have that this time. There's so many things that, like you said, you listed them all, but that just don't matter. This don't seem to matter this time. But yeah, a million people being pushed out of Gaza City,
Yeah,
um, in according to the military's plan, pushing them down to the south again,
yeah.
which was a catastrophe the last time it happened. But the last time it happened, all of Rafah was
Intact,
technically a safe area,
and it was
and
able to
that's not
take.
the case anymore. Rafah's off. Khan Yunis,
Yeah,
large parts of Khan Yunis are not tent settleable.
yeah.
Um, and there's no room, there's no resources, there's no, it's just, yeah, it's a total disaster, and it's really a devastating moment. We just keep saying this, but it just keeps, somehow we just I like, oh, they're gonna do Gaza City too, like, somehow surprised and shocked me and lots of other people, including military analysts in Israel, including
Yeah,
their
yeah.
chiefs of staff, all living chiefs of staff, chiefs of Mossad, chiefs of the Shabak internal
Yeah.
security. They're all
But
like, this can't happen.
like what I've come to say and like report on this channel, like we we've always for years talked about how Hezbollah doesn't bluff. When they say they have some capacity, they have it. They had capacities they didn't use, of course, but like Israel has not bluffed. When they said they were gonna attack Rafah, they attacked Rafah. When they said they were gonna attack Lebanon, they attacked Lebanon. When they
Yeah,
said they were gonna attack Iran, they attacked Iran. And
yeah.
none of those were like went exactly their way either.
Well, they said, yeah, they've announced all of these military operations, and they've at least attempted to
Yeah.
try to do
Yeah.
them.
They always attempt them. And so if they're saying they're gonna
Yeah.
try to occupy all of Gaza, I believe them. I don't think they're bluffing. They have no history of bluffing.
And so
So it
now
is
this
going to be a gigantic disaster.
Yeah, and right now is a gigantic disaster in Zaytun because
Yeah.
there's, according to civil defense, 50,000 people were still in Zaytun neighborhood
Mhm.
when this um, just started last week, like less than a week ago. Two brigades, which is half of a division, less than half of a division. So just to give you the idea of the kind of troops they need to call up, and the
Yeah.
precedent for that doesn't exist except going back to October 2023 when they did it. They did that first call up.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's I think that the military is sort of slow walking this a bit because
Mhm.
I think that they need troops to have breaks and they need to offer, they basically
Yeah.
restructured deployment to give a month of rest for every 3 months of battle, which would
Mhm.
basically mean that units will go into Gaza City and rotate out during the battle. So
And the
that's one of the
more,
ways.
I guess, they figure the longer it goes, the more starvation does their work for them,
Well, maybe, but the starvation plans are, you know,
falling apart.
they're the starvation plan is falling apart. They have opened the Israeli companies put pressure because Israeli companies were who profited off of
Hmm.
the aid. Like they didn't bring the aid from Norway, right? They
Hmm.
they bought the aid in Israel, or the like
Hmm.
the stuff that
Hmm.
goes into Gaza is a captive market for the Israeli
Yeah.
capitalist class, and that they had been shut out by all of this
Hmm.
aid program of the last multiple years, and even the United Nations system relied on
Hmm.
private
Yeah, of
private
course.
sector contributions as well. So that channel opened kind of quietly. I haven't seen it reported anywhere in the English press, but they were talking about it in the Israeli press and the Israeli, sort of military. Like people were mad. The genocidal
Yeah.
people were like, "What's going on?" Now they have sugar. Um, but yeah, they opened that up, and um, it changes the situation really quickly because the black market, Yasser Abu Shabab's black market, can only function if there's no
Scarcity.
other. As soon as trucks are coming in,
Mhm.
and the trucks that are coming in, according to most sources, are being secured, especially the merchant channel, are being secured by Qassam adjacent, at least, um, people. So there's order to these trucks. They're not getting torn apart like the when Israel was intentionally making, like they would tell the UN or whatever to drive their flour truck and park it in a certain spot. They wouldn't let them move. And then all the crowd comes to the truck. It just creates mayhem. And that's um,
Sorry.
yeah, part of their destruction of an entire people to have them fight over flour. And anyways, that stuff seems to have been taken a little bit, at least recently, under control. Trucks have made it to warehouses. Distribution has, it's not zero. Um, and they want it to go up because
Hmm.
the Israelis, I don't know what they think the red lines are, but the starvation thing created a red line. It made people in these governments that supported Israel be like, we're seeing even Trump being like, Trump
Don't
was
tell
like,
me it's not.
Netanyahu's lying to me. I look at my phone, I can see the kids are starving. Yeah,
Yeah.
so uh yeah, it's a dark moment, another dark moment with like potentially what seems like another year of
Yeah.
this.
At least. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna be here. We're gonna be here another year probably. Um, but let's conclude with George Abdallah because I found this interview, I heard when he got out, honestly, I admit I know a lot about these things. I know a lot of these people. I did not know about George Abdallah until after he was freed or just before. I heard George Abdallah is going to be freed. And then I heard George Abdallah is freed. And then I saw this video of his speech where he basically arrived and already like gave this absolutely rocking speech.
Yeah.
From I was like, well, hello, George Abdallah.
Hello. Yeah.
And I should have been paying closer attention to this case. And then I this interview, August 14th, No Heaven Without Gaza, a Palestine Chronicle exclusive interview with Lebanese revolutionary George Abdallah. So there's just some amazing quotes in this interview that I wanted to go through. But you did some research, you said, about George Abdallah.
Well, I mean, I know about him. I know about his campaign. He was in prison in France for 4 decades, and there would be times when he would come up for the possibility of being released, and
Yes.
and it would make the news, for a period because it was like the French have a similar justice system to Canada. Like you don't actually get life in prison, like
Right.
so, but he was on his way to
Exception.
be, yeah. And so he was basically like serious sort of violations of French law that
Right.
were and foreign interference because the Americans would intervene to get him. So he's part of this like Marxist revolutionary group in the 80s that basically, well, I mean, he joins the PFLP, but before that he's a Lebanese Christian, and his group is responsible. They took responsibility. This group that he is takes responsibility for being in for a series of assassinations in Paris of Israeli and American, um, one was a Mossad agent, one was a CIA agent, military attaché. Um, but at the time after the Israelis had invaded um, Lebanon to attack the Palestinians, and so
Right.
it overlaps with that era of 70s armed struggle and leftist
Yeah,
Marxist
and
Red
of
Brigades,
course,
Red Army faction, and
yeah,
direct action
right.
direct in Paris.
Hmm.
So yeah, I know him as the campaigns around his. I mean, I know that he also has given these kind of excellent statements, and because he was in French prison, he had access to get
Uh,
out like significant communiques, articulate communiques that could be um, made it seem like they were letters to his lawyer, but are actually, like critical communiques. And I know he always spoke up about Ahmed Sadat, the PFLP leader in Palestine, who was arrested because of the operation of the assassination that the PFLP operatives carried out against Riham Zeevi, who is, kind of like a Smotrich and Ben Gavir of his time. He was in a single issue party called the Homeland Party that their only platform they had for their political party was the expulsion of Palestinians. And he was assassinated after the assassination of Abu Ali Mustafa, the
mhm.
PFLP leader, um, in Ramallah, in his like Palestinian Legislative Council office, like his political office. He was killed in. Um, and he would give great statements about Ahmed Sadat's imprisonment. And yeah, so I was looking back on it just to see the original crime, like what they're saying the
Yeah,
original
yeah, no, I
crimes
I
were.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Like, are they saying that he was the trigger man, or they're saying that his group took responsibility for? But yeah, he doesn't. That distinction, I don't think, was made. A couple of the assassinations were clearly not him. One was a young woman executed the operation. Um, but yeah, he's unrepentant, and that
Hmm.
is has been his position all along, which I think allowed the French to, um,
Extend the
yeah, I mean, yeah,
pretext for extending.
pretext.
So Another thing I like about George Abdallah is that he refers to himself in the third person. So at least in the translation. So they ask him like how would you present yourself? And he says, um, there's no difference between how George Abdallah sees himself and how people see him. And he says, what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank confirms uh, that our people are, the resistance is highly esteemed. And as an ordinary fighter in the ranks of the resistance, I see that our people are steadfast. There are loopholes, as always happens in revolutions, but this does not stop us. The masses in Gaza embrace their emaciated children, continue to resist, and refuse to raise the white flag. Thus, we can say the resistance is in great shape despite all the subjective and objective problems. So his overall assessment is that the resistance is in great shape. He talks a lot about prison, which is, you've talked so much about this on here and EI and the centrality of prison and prison struggle. Amazing stuff he says about prison. He says prison is time. They said, how do you relate to time in prison? And he says time for in prison is for fighters and activists is a framework within which life's priorities is organized. If the activist has found solidarity, then the imprisoned activist is simply a fighter doing what he must under exceptional circumstances. And then he says, unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to do what I wanted. The interviewer says, time was tight for you in prison. And he says, time was not sufficient to do what is required of fighters and activists. I did all I could within my modest capabilities.
Yeah, just that disposition of like prison as the academy, and that
Mhm.
you could never, you never reach the the full realization of what is necessary,
Yeah.
right? There, you don't retire in prison after you've done the courses on
Yeah.
revolutionary praxis. It continues.
Um, I I want to there's this point where the interviewer says, "Is there anything you would have done differently?" And he goes, "I'm not currently engaging in self-criticism of my struggle." Overall, I'm satisfied with my path of struggle. Despite its modesty, it's as acceptable as any other fighter or activist within the framework of the available. So I think that's also great, like to be able to say that, is
Yeah, he comes out saying he's a fighter. He went in as a
yeah,
fighter. He comes out as a fighter. He's always a fighter.
that's right. And he feels like he's done what he could. Um, and then solidarity with George Abdallah, and he says solidarity with George Abdallah takes on meaning when it falls within the framework of the struggle against the war of genocide in Gaza. So if you want to be in solidarity with George Abdallah, you have to be in solidarity with Gaza. And then, again, I felt like I think this interview like really attracted me because because of the lack of self-criticism in a way. Like he's very much like, there's always things that we can criticize, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm not going to do that about myself coming out of 40 years in prison. I'm not going to do that about Gaza, which is being genocided. I'm not going to do that about the resistance, which is fighting. So I just thought that I just think that's such a good attitude to have.
Yeah.
Um, so he says about Al-Aqsa flood, he said, it's very good. We might find a loophole here or there. We are not in a position to beat ourselves up. The operation came at the right time. It is very appropriate. It has moved the struggle forward, placing new responsibilities on the shoulders of those who carried it out and lived it. And then he says, he kind of says there's a crisis in the Palestinian national project. And the interviewer says, what is the crisis? And he says, the crisis affects all aspects of the entire Palestinian national project. Israel is an organic extension of Western imperialism. Israel is not a colony or merely a settlement. It is an organic extension of this imperialist West. Therefore, confronting this imperialist West requires confronting the crisis of the imperialist system in its capitalist form. Those who confront this organic extension must stand on a ground hostile to capitalism. Therefore, the leadership of the Palestinian bourgeoisie faces a problem in this regard, and the Palestinian left is in a very embarrassing situation, having so far been unable to build a national unity to confront this organic extension and failed to affirm national unity. Of course, these are great responsibilities that fall on everyone's shoulders.
So this I noted that part too. And so he goes to prison at a time when Fatah is revolutionary
Mm-hmm.
and are carrying out operations, and the PLO are carrying out operations. The left, the PFLP, are carrying out operations, and they're working
Mm-hmm.
effectively along the same lines as the PLO. And he's obviously, his critique is the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian bourgeoisie. He talks about, Fatah. He comes out, say, like, in that interview, he's talking about Fatah in a way that in our
Yeah.
whole life covering this,
Yeah.
we I've never heard. I've
Anyone.
never heard somebody talk about revolutionary Fatah, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
even like in Jenin in the Second Intifada, like the Al Aqsa Martyrs Brigades were like basically defined by not being Fatah. They
Yes.
right, that was
Yes.
their so that vantage point where he comes out and says, like, you can't have a 60,000 strong Fatah security force.
Mm-hmm.
He sees the
Yes.
Fatah in the PA, which I think is something that is sort of like time has passed and it's become so normalized that there are subcontractors to the occupation. And he says that he says the problem is them, and they
Yeah.
need to reflect on that. And that the problem is national unity, which is
Yes.
the same thing that Sinwar would say as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
everyone who's not in the PA collaborators say,
Mm-hmm.
like, national reconciliation is a key. So
Yeah.
that's what he's saying is missing. And
That's the crisis. Let me
that's
read
the
that paragraph from because he tries to say it's not my business, and then the interviewer is like, "But we are keen to hear what you have to say in this regard." So he mentions the 60,000 fighters, and then he says the leaders of all Palestinian organizations agreed on something at the Beijing conference, but what was its result? The result was the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh. Why assassinate Haniyeh? Because he was part of the wing in Hamas who called for unity. This does not mean that the Palestinian Authority welcomed the call. This is the crisis of the national project. Those who bear the responsibility are those in Palestine and outside of Palestine. They are the resistance fighters in Gaza and the West Bank, and even those who are part of the Palestinian Authority and inside the Israeli prisons. It is certainly a major crisis, but I'm sure the active members of Palestinian society will be able to overcome it.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the Al Aqsa flood
And he
operation,
was
oh,
assassinated because he didn't surrender.
Haniyeh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's saying essentially that the Fatah that he knew
Yeah.
has surrendered, like, at
Yeah.
least, if not worse,
Yeah.
which I
So,
think is actually to go lightly on the PA. And I think
yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
and I think
Which
that,
is but which is the Hamas approach too. Everybody's kid gloves with the PA. It's
yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's the nature of the impossible situation. Okay, so George Abdallah continues. The Al Aqsa flood surprised everyone, marked a turning point in the history of the conflict, but also imposes enormous responsibilities on everyone. The enemy is well aware that it is now in the final chapter of its existence. It is not a matter of a military setback.
Yeah. So this is something that, yeah, so he's essentially saying that Israel's behavior in
Yeah.
this war has sealed its fate. And this is actually something that has rippled up a bit. And like, I've heard, you know, even in Western analysis, like The Economist the other day talked about it. Um, just that, like, this is their Battle of Algiers. This is their
Hmm.
Algeria moment where you can believe that you won the
Yeah.
battle or whatever, but you're you lost the war and you can never get it back. The thing that
Yeah.
you've lost, the stain of genocide, essentially,
Yeah.
is what dooms forever. And he also said that Israel's actions, like, in the trajectory, are what creates foments revolution, that this is the kind of actions that gets the world
Yes.
involved. And I think, I think probably a lot of activists from the 70s that carried out these
Hmm.
operations and, broke down in small cells with their friends and carried out these kind of actions. I think that you can imagine them being like, I'm not sure where those are today. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of things about being in prison for 41 years at least that I think definitely were interesting, that brought like a new kind of
Unique.
clarity
Yes.
to the discussion because of his, he was pretty open about French prison being, not the worst of all the
Yeah.
prisons.
Yeah.
He was able to, meet and
Read.
yeah, and read um but also host, right? He could
Yeah.
visit, so he could
Yeah.
have
American
delegations.
American and Israeli prisons are basically trying to kill you. They're trying to kill you at a slow, painful pace.
Yeah.
And like there are some countries in the world where prisons are prisons where they're trying to lock you up and you can't leave. And that's like the main issue of that's the main thing about prison, and that's the main thing that punishes you is that you are not out of prison.
So the next part is the interesting part. When
The
he starts,
mediators. Yeah.
yeah, the Arab Street and the role that Egypt and Qatar being mediators
Hmm.
has done to the revolutionary fire of the, so-called Arab Street.
Hmm. That's
Uh,
an angle I didn't think of at all. But that the fact that these are supposed to be part of the Arab nation that should see itself as being colonized by Israel, and seeing it should see itself as having its own people being murdered by Israel, which is the
mhm,
way Yemen sees it and the way Yemen talks about it. They say our occupied lands.
mhm.
But instead, Egypt and Qatar are mediators,
Yeah,
right?
they're like
That
they're doing the
neutral.
the Ghassan Kanafani, like it's the conversation between the sword and the
Yeah.
neck,
And they're
like
passing messages back and forth.
yeah, as if they're mediating between the sword and the neck. They're not actual
Yeah.
they're not actually helping the situation, but that they have diffused. I mean, he seemed like he got like wound up a bit, right? Because
Hmm.
towards the end, he sort of loses that like humility of the
Diplomacy.
struggle, and he starts to say like, where are there's not even demonstrations in
Yeah.
Egypt. There hasn't been anything that's forced the government in Egypt. And then he goes on to Jordan. He says the same thing. Jordan, there has been demos in Jordan for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Um, but not not as, I mean, he says not as
Yeah.
clear as a country that is, I think, doesn't he outright say a country that is 60%
Yeah.
Palestinian or like,
Yeah. Let's read a bit more of it, because he
yeah.
says the value of the Palestinian revolution lies in its role as a lever of the Arab revolution. So the Palestinian revolution is at the end of the lever. You pull this lever and you get the whole Arab nation. That's what it should have been. It's historically, but it's not playing this role. The Palestinian leadership must answer why it abandoned this role. Who is Qatar mediating between? Egypt. Who is Egypt mediating between? Egypt is Al Azhar. So Al Azhar is like the oldest university in maybe in the world, maybe ever. I don't know, but like Al Azhar is not a tourist agency. It
It's
encompasses
the
all the
center of Islamic thought.
yeah. Encompasses the value of this nation. 80 million people consider Al Azhar their moral authority. Where are the 80 million? Who is responsible for their inaction? And he says it suffices that one of the 80 million, meaning 1 million, move toward Rafah and perform prayers there. They are not required to carry a gun or any other faction. All they have to do is offer a cup of water or a cup of milk to the children of Gaza. Al Azhar is responsible for this inaction. It must know that its prayers are not accepted if they are not held at the crossing to Gaza. It must also be known there is no path to heaven for all believers in Egypt, because the children of Palestine have occupied all the roads while they are ascending to heaven. Those who wish to enter heaven must come to Gaza. Otherwise, there is no heaven for them. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so then, yeah, then they ask him about the Arab regimes, like you said. And he says, when I see that not a single person in Egypt was killed while demonstrating simply because they did not demonstrate, where are they from young Greta, who came all the way from Sweden to raise a glass of water? So again, Northern Europeans are being held by these Arab resistance leaders as like shame on the Arabs. Greta, Norway, compared to Egypt or Saudi. Where are they from Rima Hassan, who came from Belgium and raised a glass of milk in solidarity with Gaza? Where are the sailors of Egypt? Where is Jordan? Where are the masses of Jordan? Where are the 60% of the people of Amman who are originally Palestinians? So, um, right. So then the next question is many who were believers in the resistance project have stopped being so following the atrocities in Gaza. What do you say to that? He says, I don't see such people. They're not, people in Gaza are not raising the white flag. So there is no time to self-flagellate or claim that morale has collapsed. There are no people on this planet like those in Gaza. Gaza has been hit 3 times more than what hit Hiroshima, 17,000 tons of explosives in Gaza, while Dresden was hit with 5,000 tons. Gaza did not surrender while Dresden fell. So that's also really good. He says, oh yeah, he says when the problem remains in our national project and our national leadership because the masses all over the world stand with Gaza. When 30% of Jewish youth in America raise the Palestinian flag, what does this mean? It means the countdown to Israel's existence has started. So he kind of thinks there's a lot of energy out there that is not being channeled by the leaders of the nation.
Yeah, he makes the point about surrender, right? I mean, we made this point. I remember talking to you about this probably on this show right after Sinwar was killed, and just saying like, you have a leader who's fighting on the front lines in Rafah, like who can be like Abbas and sell out the
Yeah,
Palestinian struggle when you have leadership like Hania and Sinwar, and he kind of made that same point. He made that same point sort of over and over again about not surrendering and the revolution being an ongoing process that you can't that has to gain momentum. And he didn't say it as a past tense like Egypt, you're failures, right? They're saying he's still saying like
there's
there's
still time.
there's still time.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
yeah, it
uh,
and it's a necessity.
yeah. The genocide in Gaza will not succeed. Gaza and the West Bank will triumph as Israel witnesses the last chapter of its existence. And this is not a poetic speech. They said, you've said this more than once. He says, I'm not the only one to repeat it. Israel has never been through what it is currently going through, which is why it will use its entire barbaric stockpile on us. Israel will throw all its unexploited barbarism at our masses in the coming days, weeks, and months. How will those who planned the Al-Aqsa flood operation face this? These are questions that require answers from all factions. And he mentioned Sinwar and Haniyeh are because of these leaders, the resistance can't be defeated. So, um,
Very welcomed intervention in this
yeah,
moment, uh, for sure.
yeah. So I think that was the main. Oh yeah, he did have some stuff to say about Lebanon too. My favorite quote about Lebanon was he goes, "You can say all you want about this resistance, that it needs to represent all the Lebanese people or it needs to be this or that. However, for you to have the right to speak, you must be on the side of the resistance, not the occupation." Um, if you are on the side of the occupation, you have no right to speak or even exist. When your country is under occupation, whoever stands with the enemy, regardless of their status or justifications, has no right to exist.
Yeah, and needs doesn't he say one more thing? Like it needs to be like isolated and targeted, essentially. That kind of
Yeah.
collaborationist thought. And he also makes the point about Lebanon that the resistance he was very
Yeah, he wants
straightforward. He said the
integration. Yeah.
resistance should be ready to form a national
Yeah.
to participate in a national
Oh yeah.
army.
This is my absolute favorite quote about Lebanon. He says the existing resistance might have certain flaws and we might have certain reservations towards it. Go ahead and get me a better resistance. But to come to me and tell me this resistance is not good and you'll bring me an Israeli soldier instead, then I will fight you and the Israeli soldier. It is as simple as that, despite the complexities of the situation in Lebanon. That's my favorite. Go ahead and get me a better resistance. And we have a model meters away from us in Damascus.
Yeah.
Um, and America and Israel come and say, I'll protect you from each other.
Yeah, he says look at Syria. We should not be debating the best way to surrender.
Exactly. Yeah, so good.
And then it ends on a great note where the interviewer says like I mean, it sounds as though he's done a number of interviews, and it
Yeah,
seemed like he was kind of tired.
yeah.
Um, but they'd said like, "So what are you going to do with your freedom or whatever?" And he was like, "I'm going to do a bunch of these interviews,
Interviews. I'm gonna go to the camps and see
and
my
then I'm
friends.
and then I'm going to go to the camps and find my people,"
But
which just
they
seemed
ask
like a
him, "Do you
beautiful
fear for
one.
your life?" And he says, "No, I do not fear anything. George Abdallah is an ordinary citizen like all others, and is not courageous, by the way." And I sent this to some of our friends. I sent it to Nora, and I said, "By the way, Justin Pador is also not courageous."
No, it's a good point. You want revolutionaries, you want the
Yeah,
revolution to be something people can participate in, not something that's taken undertaken by people who have some sort of
super.
extraordinary capabilities
That's right.
that most people don't have. And to end on that note in this moment is, I think, it's just a very welcome, welcome home, Georges.
Welcome home, George Abdallah. All right, well, that could have we could have ended on a we could definitely have ended on a worse note than that. So why don't we stop there? Thanks, John.
All right, guys, we'll see you soon.
Hang in there, everybody.